Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by Next Gen Purpose, hosted by me, Justine Reichman. Every Tuesday, we serve up thoughtful conversations with founders, sustainability leaders, and community organizers who share their stories and missions within the regenerative food sphere. It's all about boosting forward-thinking folks and brands working to make better for you and better for the planet food more accessible. Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Melissa Villanueva, who is the CEO and founder of Brewpoint Coffee. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Justine.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so glad that, we are able to have this conversation. And I love learning that, one of my favorite coffees taught you how to roast. So that was quite a fun fact I liked. And now I'm excited to try your coffee when it comes. But in the meantime, can you tell us a little bit about Brewpoint Coffee?
Absolutely. So have you ever looked on Craigslist for an espresso machine only to buy a coffee shop instead? Because that is the story of Brewpoint Coffee. 9 years ago, me and my 7-month boyfriend found this coffee shop on Craigslist, bought it with no idea what we were doing. 9 years later, I now have a full-fledged coffee company with 4 coffee shops, coffee manufacturing, and I really focus with a mission on creating a more an inclusive and diverse environment for DuPage County, so right outside of Chicagoland area.
Wow. Okay, first of all, going on, did you say Craigslist?
Yeah, it's as wild as it sounds. Honestly, it was like I was looking for an espresso machine to start toying around with. I thought maybe in 3 years I would open a coffee shop, but I needed like a business plan. I needed money. I had none of that. But I had a boyfriend, now husband, who really believed in me and support from family as well. Found this coffee shop on Craigslist, bought it in 1 month, and just really was dedicated to getting a little bit better every single day. Hence, now we have our full-fledged coffee company 9 years later.
That's amazing. So curious. So what were you doing before? What were you doing when you were looking for this coffee machine?
Sure. So I was a director of recruitment and retention at a financial firm for 3 years, right outside of college. And then I met my said boyfriend. He encouraged me to quit my job, follow my dreams. And so 2 months I was unemployed in the Philippines, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I just caught this vision of a community space driven by coffee, and that's what I was like, I think that's what I want to do, but I want to be responsible and put a plan together. The week I come back from the Philippines, I find this coffee shop on Craigslist, and the rest is history. So
wow. So you're a first-time entrepreneur.
mm-hmm.
You had been doing something completely different, recruitment,
Yes.
which you have to recruit for being an entrepreneur. But so did you always have this passion for coffee and sustainability and inclusiveness? Like, was that something that you felt is like a core value for you that you were missing in what you were doing and wanted to create something around that?
Yeah, I mean, as a brown woman in the US, like I think for me, belonging has always been a key part of like my journey.
Mhm.
And creating Brewpoint for me was creating a space of belonging for myself, but also wanting to create a space of belonging for others, and wanting to be as inclusive and diverse in that as possible. And so really, I mean, Brewpoint was driven by this desire to build community and as inclusive and diverse of a community as I possibly could. And then as I kept going, I was like, well, I have to be sustainable. I have to make some level of money. I have to figure out the systems and operations so we're not all chaotic. And so it has been this like month after month, just trying to figure out how to get better and not just create a culture and create great products, but also create a business that can, last beyond me. So it's been a wild journey.
So, given this is your first time at the go, being an entrepreneur, right? And how did you feel when you kicked off this company and you'd never done it before and you didn't, and you in your head, you're like, okay, I can't do this until I have a business plan. And then all of a sudden you're buying a coffee shop. So how did you bridge that gap and that, conversation in your head?
Sometimes you flow in life and certain opportunities come your way and you just know in your gut that this is something that you can't miss out on. And that really was like the moment I saw this coffee shop on Craigslist, like my stomach dropped and it was like, I have to figure out how to make this work. We actually lost the opportunity at one point where someone else had swooped in and purchased it. And that's when I knew for sure that like this like I did not want to lose that. Luckily, it came back on the market, and I knew I had to move forward with it. And so, for me, it really has just been this matter of living out. You know, part of entrepreneurship is partially being a little delusional. It really is. Like, you have to have this like incredible optimism and manifestation of what you think is possible to get anything close to that.
Mhm.
And even though I didn't have the data, I did have a strong belief in myself and a strong belief in what, I could do. And so I just knew I could figure it out, even if it meant, long, long days, long nights, not a lot of money at first, but, over time, it really has been able to build up. And so one little snippet I'll give is that the coffee shop that we bought on Craigslist, we just bought the assets, but it was doing $180 a day. And so I remember thinking, I think I can do better than that. And now that location averages between $2,000 and $3,000 a day.
Wow,
So
that's great.
it's,
That's
yeah,
that's
it's fun.
really good. So you bought this, you didn't have money because you said you were not, it's not like you'd save for this. It wasn't like you planned for it. Kind of went in to go buy your espresso machine to toy with it. So how did you get from being unemployed to getting an espresso to buying this company without having planned? Like, what were some of the resources you tapped into to make it come to fruition?
Yeah, no, it really, it was a very quick turnaround as well because we found it in June, bought it in August.
Mhm.
Um, but with that being said, my 7-month boyfriend, he was very serious, and I was very serious about him, but we like we're pretty new in our relationship. Um, Essentially, instead of engagement ring, I like to joke that he bought me a coffee shop instead.
Oh,
And so we locked down that relationship very quickly. We got engaged 2 months into Brewpoint and married 4 months into that. But it was a little bit of that, and then also support from both our parents. And so I do feel like we were really lucky to be able to make that type of decision. I know on a financial standpoint, my worst case scenario would be that we'd be a little bit in debt, but we would, worst case scenario, we could get jobs and pay off our debt fairly quickly. It was like a low access point to owning a coffee shop because I think the shop itself was $36,000 when they had invested about $100,000 a couple of years before.
wow.
Yeah.
So it's how many years later now?
9 years.
9 years. And so when you got this coffee shop, where did you dream you'd be, 5 years, 10 years down? Because that's where we're at now. And I'm curious how that aligns with what you had dreamt about in your head.
Yeah, no, honestly, I don't think I had all that I was dreaming about is like this community space where people, come in every day, they enjoy their cup of coffee. And within the first 2 years of owning Brewpoint, I realized really quickly that maybe me and my husband could make enough money to make ends meet for us, but we really couldn't do that very well for our team, and really couldn't do much power in terms of investing in like farming relationships as well. And so 2 years in, we decided that we'd grow so that we could have a little bit more economic viability so that we could, build relationships with farmers, and we could start paying career level wages for like managers and above. And it kind of just kept going from there. So it was like, okay, can 2 shops do it? No, 2 shops can't do it. Can 3? Can 4? Can roasting and manufacturing? And so we ended up becoming not so much of this replicable, scalable coffee shop, but we've become this whole ecosystem
Mhm.
of, having relationships with our farmers in Costa Rica, having a whole women-owned supply chain from that relationship, and then also making sure that we have our multiple coffee shops that we can utilize our buying power so we can have some, long-term sustainability. So yeah.
Awesome. That's exciting. So if you were to be talking to other founders that are listening to this podcast or watching the video cast, what would you tell them if they had an idea without a plan?
I think that, it is this mix, right? Like I really believe that you have to have some level of delusion and an incredible amount of hope and optimism to like take that leap and be an entrepreneur. Sometimes, trying to line up all the plans make it so that like you never really open a coffee shop, or you never really open your business ever because
Right.
nothing ever really aligns, becomes right. I think that it's this mix of, this optimism and hope coupled with just like a tenacity to make it work no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is problem solving each problem at a time, not becoming overwhelmed when you see the larger picture, but you just kind of focus, you accomplish the next thing and you accomplish the next thing. So if you can really believe in yourself and you know that like you'll be committed to going all in, I knew I needed that. I needed to be all in to like not give up. If I was only half in, I don't know. I think I might have just, defaulted to things that are more comfortable. But I do think that, assessing what's your worst case scenario, making sure you have that figured out, and then just jumping in is what can make, your dreams reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would agree. I like that comment that there is some delusion in it. I mean, you have to have a pie in the sky kind of dream. And that in Chinese medicine, they call it jur, but I'm trying to think like it's the incentive, it's the drive to want to make that happen, because in the beginning of a business, you're doing everything. It doesn't matter. So you need to have that vision that makes you want to do it so badly that it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
To make it happen. In my mind, that's how I see it, because there's nobody more motivated than me in my business. Although I have a great team, starting out, I had to be my own motivator.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key. So now that you have about 9 years under your belt and you're looking at the future, what do you see for the future for you guys?
Yeah, no, so it actually is really interesting, right? Because we're in an interesting time where we had some rhythm before the pandemic, and then we had the pandemic, and now we're in like this new stage where everything you're just trying to figure out this new, economic system. And our industry, if I'm entirely honest, is struggling. So especially coffee is one in which, unless you've scaled to a higher level, I'm really curious how most small businesses are going to make it work. Brewpoint is kind of in this middle ground where we're able to be that small business that can disrupt and be a bit different because of our size. But if you're a bit smaller, if you don't have the same traction, if you don't have the same buying power, our margins overall have really decreased since the pandemic, about 5 to 10%. And I'm not just saying with Brewpoint specifically, it's more just generally across the board. Global warming has caused, especially coffee farms to have to increase their prices, which is absolutely necessary. And then, cost of wages, general cost of goods have all gone up. And so there has to be a lot of data orientedness, a lot of strategy when, companies like me that have been a little bit more culture oriented, a little bit more just like vision and inspiration, we've had to really pivot into being data oriented since 2023. A lot of us did get some level of support during the pandemic, which helped us get into a strong position. Mm-hmm. And for myself, it has been being data focused in 2023, looking at 10% profitability across the board in 2024, and then reinvestment that aligns with our values into our systems, into our people in 2025. And so for me, it is about like, I want to have the strongest foundation possible to make sure that our next step moving forward is something that like, not just that I want for myself, but I want for like my life and community, because one of the entrepreneurs that I really do admire and really like how they've made an impact is Chip and Joanna Gaines from they're the Fixer Upper couple.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's because of their hyper local investment while also being nationally known and, of who they are and what they do. And so for myself, like I want to be hyper local, but I also want to showcase how we've done what we've done so others can be entrepreneurs and make local community impact through coffee shops as well.
Admirable, and really amazing as you grow that those are what you're focused on. So I give you a lot of credit for that. And it makes, for me, that's the way I drive what I buy, what I eat, so I think that story is so important so that the community can get behind you, not just because you got great coffee, but because what you stand for is so amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm curious, if you, looking back, as you were a new entrepreneur, is there anything that you might have done differently now with this set of experience that you have?
Yeah, no, I think that, part of it is just being really honest with your skill set. So for myself, like I can cast a vision, I can do sales, I can do recruiting. So my team is way more talented in all the departments that they run than I. But it is knowing that like this is what I'm good at. What I'm not as good at is being hyper detail oriented. Sometimes follow through is something that I've struggled with in the past, and making sure that you align yourself with a team that really complements your skills, because you can't do everything. So for myself, I something that I wish I did in the very beginning, we did it within the first year, but is investing in the main things like the right accountant, the right attorney to set up everything correctly. Sometimes we can be so scrappy that we might not, know where to put the right investments in. And I do think that those two things are kind of non-negotiable. You can be scrappy in a lot of other areas as a small business owner, but you don't want to be scrappy too much on the ways that you do accounting or the ways in which you formulate yourself legally. So,
Right. I think there's a fine line and a point where scrappy meets strategic.
yeah.
And so I think it's important to think along those lines, because you really do need to be scrappy, but you equally need to be a little bit strategic to be able to set that foundation in a way that you did that makes it so strong going forward.
Yeah, and it's been also interesting as my company has gotten bigger to realize I don't have to be scrappy all the time. That sometimes that might be detrimental to like what we're
Yeah.
building on a larger end. Because now we have more access to resources and we can make larger scale decisions. And scrappiness can get you from 0 to a million, but when you want to go really beyond that and you know what your goals are, it takes more longer term strategy and more longer term investments.
Yeah, I would agree. And so for those folks interested in Brewpoint, where can they find your coffee?
Yeah. So you can find us at brewpointcoffee.com. We sell and distribute nationwide. We are in the Chicagoland area, primarily in Elmhurst and Oak Park. And so we are in a number of like wholesale accounts. So we are in local grocery stores and restaurants as well. But you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Brewpoint Coffee.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to learn about you, your journey, and what you built.
Thanks so much for highlighting us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, keep us posted on how things progress. We'd love to revisit this with you as you grow and expand and evolve
Yeah.
over the next, few years. So
Thank you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to you taking a sip of Brewpoint coffee. So
I can't wait. So I look forward to it arriving. So thanks so much. Thanks for digging in. To learn more about these stories, you can access the show notes at nextgenpurpose.com/podcast. If you like what you just heard, head to Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening to hit subscribe and leave us a review. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at essential.ingredients and check out our weekly newsletter for your dose of food industry info. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel for videocasts of each episode and give this episode a like while you're there. You can also connect with me directly at justine.reichman on Instagram and The Real Justine Reichman on TikTok. See you next week.